Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his warship, watching his fleet fall apart. The tall alien had crystal-like skin that normally glowed blue, but today it looked gray with worry. Through the large window, he could see the remains of what used to be the biggest space fleet in the galaxy. Now only 12 ships were left out of thousands. The enemy was winning. The Devourers had been attacking for 3 years now, and they never stopped. They ate entire planets and turned everything into more soldiers. 17 star systems were already gone. Billions of people were dead or worse, turned into those horrible bug creatures. Zektar's hands shook as he touched the communication panel. He had never felt so helpless. The other admirals on different ships were asking him what to do, but he had no answers left. Every plan had failed. Every weapon they tried just made the Devourers stronger. "Admiral," said his assistant, a small furry creature named Pip, "the Council is waiting for your decision." Zektar looked at the data screen showing all the inhabited planets they knew about. Most were already under attack or destroyed, but there were still some unknown worlds out there, planets they had never contacted before. Maybe one of them could help. "Send out the emergency signal," Zektar said quietly, "to every planet we know about, and every planet we think might have life." "Even the primitive worlds, sir?" Pip asked. "Especially the primitive worlds," Zektar replied. "Sometimes the most dangerous fighters are the ones nobody expects." Far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, Dr. Amy Rodriguez was working the night shift at the SETI Research Center. She was drinking her 4th cup of coffee when the computers started making noise. At first, she thought it was just another false alarm, but then she saw the signal pattern on her screen. It was not random. It was definitely from an intelligent source, and it was coming from outside the solar system. Amy's hands were shaking as she called her supervisor. "Dr. Martinez, you need to get down here right now. We're receiving an artificial signal from space." 20 minutes later, the small research station was full of people. Military officers, government officials, and scientists all crowded around Amy's computer. The message was being translated by their best programs, but some parts were still unclear. General Kyle Bennett, a tough-looking man with gray hair, read the translation out loud. "Any species capable of military assistance, full membership in Galactic Coalition, access to advanced technology, in exchange for aid against extinction-level threat." The room went quiet. President Lisa Martinez, who had flown in by helicopter, stared at the screen. "This is real? We're really getting a message from aliens?" "Yes, ma'am," Amy said. "And from what I can understand, they're in serious trouble. They're asking for help fighting something that's destroying their civilization." Admiral Jake Morrison, the head of the Navy, laughed, but not in a happy way. "So the first time aliens contact us, they want us to fight their war for them?" "It sounds like they're desperate," said Dr. Rodriguez. "Look at this part of the message. They're offering us technology that's hundreds of years ahead of what we have. That's not something you give away unless you're really scared." General Bennett studied the message again. What kind of enemy could destroy an entire galactic civilization? They obviously have space travel, advanced weapons, probably shields and energy systems we can only dream of. If they can't handle this threat, what makes them think we can? President Martinez looked around the room at all the serious faces. "Maybe they think we have something they don't." "Like what?" Admiral Morrison asked. "I don't know," the president said, "but there's only one way to find out. Dr. Rodriguez, send a reply. Tell them Earth accepts their request for alliance. We'll provide military assistance in exchange for the technology and coalition membership they're offering." Amy's fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. "What should I tell them about our capabilities?" General Bennett grinned, and for the first time that night, he looked excited instead of worried. "Tell them we're sending our best. Don't give them details about our weapons or tactics. Let it be a surprise." As the message was sent into space, President Martinez made phone calls to wake up every important military leader in the country. Within hours, a secret meeting was happening in the Pentagon. The topic was simple: how fast could they build a spaceship and get their most dangerous soldiers ready for an alien war? Colonel Ryan Parker was pulled out of a training exercise in Alaska. He was told only that he was needed for a classified mission that would determine the future of humanity. As his transport plane flew toward Washington, he wondered what could be so important that they would interrupt special operations training. He had no idea that in a few weeks he would be leading human soldiers into their first battle against an alien enemy. He also had no idea that the aliens who called for help would soon be more afraid of humans than they were of their original enemy. The message from Admiral Zektar had traveled across space looking for salvation. What it found instead was something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that treated war not as a last resort, but as an art form they had been practicing for thousands of years. Earth was about to show the universe what real monsters looked like. The USS Relentless cut through space like a metal arrow. Inside the ship, Colonel Ryan Parker checked his equipment one more time. He had fought in deserts, jungles, and mountains, but this was different. This time, he was going to meet aliens and probably fight other aliens he had never seen before. The ship itself was impressive. Earth's best engineers had worked day and night for 2 months to build it, using technology they had secretly gotten from crashed alien ships over the years. Most people on Earth did not know about those crashes, but the military did. Now, all that hidden knowledge was finally useful. Captain Steve Walsh walked onto the bridge, looking tired but ready. He had been chosen to command the mission because he was one of the few people who understood both naval warfare and the new alien technology. Colonel Parker, we're about to drop out of hyperspace. The alien fleet should be waiting for us. Parker nodded and looked out the window. Space looked the same as always, black with tiny stars. But somewhere out there was an entire civilization that was losing a war they could not win. "Contact!" shouted Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes from her station. "Multiple ships ahead. They're big." The view screen showed the Coalition fleet, and Parker had to admit he was impressed. The ships were huge, some of them several miles long. They looked like they were made of crystal and metal, glowing with soft blue light, but even from a distance he could see they were damaged. Burn marks covered their hulls, and some ships were clearly missing pieces. A voice came through the speakers, speaking in a language that sounded like music mixed with static. The translation system worked quickly. "Earth vessel, this is Admiral Zektar of the Altarian Republic. Please dock with our flagship for briefing and tactical coordination." Captain Walsh activated the communication system. "Admiral Zektar, this is Captain Walsh of the USS Relentless. We're honored to meet you and ready to assist in your fight." An hour later, Parker found himself walking through corridors that seemed to be made of living crystal. The alien ship was beautiful but strange. Everything curved and flowed like water that had been frozen in place. The gravity felt normal, but the air tasted different, cleaner somehow. Dr. Amy Rodriguez walked beside him, carrying a tablet full of notes about alien culture and language. She had become Earth's expert on alien contact in just 2 months, learning everything she could from the few intercepted communications they had received. "Remember," she whispered to Parker, "they probably see war very differently than we do. From what I can tell, most galactic species try to avoid violence whenever possible." "That might be their problem," Parker replied quietly. They entered a large room filled with aliens of different types. Some looked like Zektar, tall and crystal-like. Others were furry, some had tentacles, and a few looked almost human except for their purple skin and extra arms. All of them turned to stare at the humans when they walked in. Admiral Zektar was even taller in person, maybe 8 feet high. His crystal skin was still that worried gray color, and his large eyes studied the humans carefully. "Welcome, humans. You are smaller than we expected." Parker looked up at the alien admiral without showing any emotion. Sometimes the smallest packages contain the biggest surprises. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward and bowed slightly. Something she had read was polite in many alien cultures. "Admiral, we're grateful for this opportunity to help. Can you tell us about the enemy we're facing?" Zektar gestured to a large table in the center of the room. Holographic images appeared showing star maps, ship designs, and battle footage. The Devourers appeared in our space 3 of your years ago. They consume all biological matter and convert it into more soldiers. They have no fear, take no prisoners, and learn from every battle. The humans watched the battle recordings in silence. The Devourers looked like giant insects with metal parts attached to their bodies. They moved in huge swarms, covering the surface of planets like a living carpet. Their ships were organic-looking, grown rather than built. "They're a hive mind," continued another alien, this one covered in fur with 6 arms. "All of them think as one. When you kill one, the others immediately know everything it learned before dying." Captain Walsh studied the tactical displays. "What weapons work best against them?" "Energy weapons have some effect," Zektar said, "but they adapt quickly. Kinetic weapons are considered primitive and rarely used in galactic warfare. Most of our ships rely on plasma cannons and particle beams." Sergeant Major Tony Brooks, Parker's second-in-command, grinned. It was not a nice grin. "Good thing we brought different toys." The aliens did not understand what he meant, but they would soon. Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked at the star charts showing Devourer movements. "They're heading for the mining world of Zerion 7 next. How many civilians are still there?" 12 million, Zektar said sadly. "We cannot evacuate them in time. We will make our stand there and try to hold the planet. But..." He did not finish the sentence. Everyone knew what he meant. Dr. Rodriguez noticed something in the battle footage. "Admiral, I notice your forces always try to avoid destroying cities or natural resources. Is there a reason for that?" Zektar looked confused by the question. "Of course. Unnecessary destruction is barbaric. Civilized species do not wage total war. We fight to defend ourselves, not to cause suffering." The humans looked at each other. Parker could see what his team was thinking. These aliens fought like they were playing a game with rules. The Devourers fought to survive and win at any cost. "Admiral," Parker said carefully, "when you're fighting for the survival of your species, there are no rules except victory. We understand that concept very well." Zektar assigned the human forces to a support role in the upcoming battle. They would provide backup to the main alien forces and help with evacuation if needed. It was clear the aliens did not expect much from the newcomers. As they walked back to their ship, Dr. Rodriguez looked worried. "Ryan, they have no idea what we're really like, do they?" Parker shook his head. "They think we're just another civilized species who will follow their rules of war. They called for backup against monsters, but they don't realize they just invited bigger monsters to the party." Back on the USS Relentless, the human soldiers prepared for battle. They cleaned weapons that would have horrified the aliens, chemical explosives, kinetic penetrators, and devices designed not just to kill but to terrify. They had trained for this their entire lives, not just to fight, but to win no matter what the cost. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived everything their violent planet had thrown at them for millions of years. They were about to discover that sometimes, the only way to stop a monster is to become a worse monster. The planet Zerion 7 looked peaceful from space. It was covered with blue oceans, green forests, and white clouds that reminded the humans of Earth. But that peace was about to end forever. Colonel Ryan Parker stood on the bridge of the USS Relentless, watching the alien coalition fleet take defensive positions around the planet. The ships moved in perfect formations, their weapons charged and ready. Everything looked professional and organized. "Enemy contacts incoming," reported Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes. "Long-range sensors show..." Dear God, there are thousands of them. On the main screen, the Devourer fleet appeared like a swarm of angry wasps. Their ships were dark and organic-looking, pulsing with veins of red light. They moved without formation, just rushing forward in a massive wave that blocked out the stars. Admiral Zektar's voice came through the communications. "All ships, prepare for engagement. Remember, our goal is to protect the civilian population and minimize collateral damage." Captain Steve Walsh shook his head. "They're still thinking about minimizing damage while facing an enemy that wants to eat everyone on that planet." When the smoke cleared, the human soldiers emerged from their holes and continued fighting. They had given up ground to deny it to the enemy, something no other species in the galaxy had ever done. By the end of the first day, the human forces had not only stopped the Devourer advance, but had actually pushed them back. They had used weapons and tactics that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective against an enemy that had never faced them before. Admiral Zektar watched the battle reports in amazement. How is this possible? They have inferior technology and no space support, but they're winning. Captain Walsh's reply came through the communication system. Admiral, you called for backup against an enemy that was destroying your civilization. You didn't ask for our best technology. You asked for our best fighters. There's a difference. That night, as coalition forces regrouped and tended their wounded, the humans continued their assault. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, hunting devourers with knives and explosives. They took no prisoners and showed no mercy. The devourers, for the first time in their species' history, began to retreat rather than face human forces. They had found something they feared more than death, an enemy that fought harder and dirtier than they did. The galaxy had called for backup, and backup had arrived, but now they were starting to wonder if the cure might be worse than the disease. News of the human victory at Zerion 7 spread through the Coalition fleet faster than light-speed communications. In the command center of the flagship, Admiral Zektar stared at battle reports that made no sense to him. According to every military doctrine he knew, the humans should have been overwhelmed and destroyed within hours. Instead, they had done the impossible. They had stopped a devourer invasion and pushed the enemy back off-planet. Most shocking of all, they had done it with weapons that looked like museum pieces compared to Coalition technology. Admiral, said his aide Pip, the other fleet commanders are requesting a meeting. They want to understand how the humans achieved victory. Zektar nodded, but his crystal skin remained that worried gray color. Schedule the meeting, but first I want to speak with Colonel Parker privately. An hour later, Parker sat across from the alien admiral in a small conference room. The human looked calm and relaxed, like he had just finished a training exercise instead of fighting for the survival of an entire planet. Colonel, Zektar began, your tactics were unusual. Calling artillery fire on your own positions, destroying valuable terrain, fighting without regard for environmental protection. These methods are not used by civilized species. Parker leaned back in his chair. Admiral, with respect, civilized species don't usually face extinction-level threats. When survival is at stake, there are only two things that matter: winning and losing. Everything else is luxury. But the cost, Zektar protested. The valley you destroyed will take decades to restore. The pollution from your weapons will affect the ecosystem for years. How long will it take to restore 12 million dead civilians? Parker asked quietly. Because that's what would have happened if we had followed your rules. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes was studying intercepted Devourer communications in the intelligence center of the USS Relentless. What she found made her blood run cold. Captain Walsh, she called, you need to see this. The Devourers are learning from our tactics faster than expected. They're already developing countermeasures. Walsh looked at the analysis on her screen. How fast? Fast enough that our next engagement will be much harder. They're a hive mind, so everything one learns, they all learn instantly. They've never faced kinetic weapons before, but now they're adapting their armor specifically to stop bullets. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, who had been monitoring Coalition communications, entered the room with her own disturbing news. Captain, we have another problem. The aliens are scared of us now. I'm picking up private conversations between fleet commanders. They're questioning whether asking for human help was a good idea. Why? Walsh asked. Because we fight like the Devourers, she said. No rules, no mercy, no limits. To them, we're starting to look like the same kind of threat they called us to fight. The concern proved justified when Captain Nathan Gray's Special Operations team deployed for their first night mission. Gray was a tall, thin man who spoke quietly and moved like a shadow. His team specialized in psychological warfare, a concept that did not exist in Coalition military doctrine. They infiltrated a Devourer camp using techniques that would have made the aliens sick to watch. Instead of killing sentries, they captured them and used devourer pheromones to confuse the hive mind's communications. They planted dead devourers in positions where living ones would find them, creating fear and paranoia in a species that had never experienced those emotions. The coalition forces monitoring the mission watched in horror as Gray's team used the enemy's own biology against them. They had never seen warfare conducted like this, not just to kill the enemy, but to break their minds. "This is barbaric," Commander Veltar said, watching the operation through remote sensors. "They're torturing captured enemies for information." Dr. Rodriguez tried to explain. "Commander, humans developed these tactics fighting each other for thousands of years. We learned that sometimes breaking an enemy's will to fight is more effective than just killing them." "But the suffering," Veltar replied. "How can you justify causing unnecessary pain? How can you justify letting your people die to avoid causing pain to an enemy that wants to eat them?" She answered. The real shock came 3 days later when Admiral Jake Morrison arrived with reinforcements. The USS Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace carrying weapons that made the Coalition's military experts pale with terror. Morrison was an older man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had fought in more wars than most people could count, and he brought with him the full weight of human military doctrine developed over centuries of conflict. "Colonel Parker," he said during their first meeting, "I hope you've been going easy on these bugs, because playtime is over." The weapons Morrison brought violated several galactic warfare conventions. Nuclear devices that could sterilize entire continents. Biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. Kinetic bombardment systems that could drop tungsten rods from orbit with the force of atomic bombs. When Admiral Zektar saw the inventory, he immediately called for a private meeting with the human leadership. "These weapons," he said, his crystal skin now flashing angry red, "they are forbidden by galactic law. The use of such devices is considered a crime against all sentient life." Morrison's response was calm, but chilling. "Admiral, you called us for help against an enemy that was exterminating your entire civilization. Did you expect us to follow your laws while your people were being turned into monster food?" "But there must be limits," Zektar insisted. "Some lines that cannot be crossed." "The only line that matters," Morrison replied, "is the one between survival and extinction. Everything else is negotiable." Over the next week, human forces began implementing what they called total warfare doctrine. They poisoned water supplies on devourer-occupied worlds. They released engineered viruses that targeted devourer biology. They used captured devourers as living weapons, turning the hive mind's greatest strength into a weakness. The tide of the war shifted dramatically. For the first time in their species' history, the devourers began retreating from occupied worlds. They were not just losing battles, they were afraid to fight. But the Coalition was also afraid. Private communications between fleet commanders spoke of the human problem. They had asked for allies and received something much more dangerous. "They fight like demons," one alien commander reported to his homeworld. "They show no mercy, follow no rules, and seem to enjoy the suffering of their enemies. We may have traded one threat for a worse one." Dr. Rodriguez intercepted these communications and brought them to Colonel Parker. "Ryan, they're starting to see us as the real monsters in this war." Parker read the reports without emotion. "Amy, when this war started, how many Coalition worlds were under Devourer control?" 17 star systems, she replied. "And now?" 3, and those are being evacuated." Parker handed the reports back to her. "Then we're doing our job. Whether they like our methods or not doesn't matter. What matters is that their people are alive to complain about us." But deep down, Parker knew that after this war ended, humanity would never again be seen as just another species asking to join the galactic community. They had revealed themselves as something unique and terrifying, a species that had turned warfare into an art form and survival into a science. The galaxy had called for backup against the monsters. What they got was something much worse: professionals. 3 months after the first human ships arrived in Coalition space, the war was over. The Devourer threat that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 years was completely eliminated. Not defeated, not driven back, not negotiated with, eliminated. Every Devourer ship had been destroyed, every occupied world reclaimed, and every trace of the hive mind wiped from existence. Admiral Zektar stood in the conference room of his flagship, looking at documents that would formally welcome humanity into the Galactic Coalition. The terms were generous: full membership, access to all Coalition technology, territorial rights to dozens of star systems, and trading privileges that would make Earth one of the wealthiest worlds in the galaxy. But the crystal-skinned alien felt no joy as he prepared to sign the agreement. His skin had remained gray for weeks now, a color that among his people meant deep worry and fear. Colonel Ryan Parker, now promoted to general for his role in ending the war, sat across from Zektar with Dr. Amy Rodriguez and Admiral Jake Morrison. The humans looked tired but satisfied. They had done what they came to do. "General Parker," Zektar began carefully, "on behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I want to thank your species for saving our civilization. Without human intervention, we would all be extinct now." Parker nodded. "We're honored to have helped, Admiral. Earth looks forward to a long partnership with the Coalition." But Zektar's next words showed what was really on his mind. "However, I must address some concerns that have been raised by Coalition members about human military methods." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "What kind of concerns?" "Your species fights with a level of brutality we have never encountered," Zektar said. "You show no mercy to defeated enemies, follow no accepted rules of warfare, and seem to take satisfaction in causing maximum suffering. How can we be sure you won't turn these methods against Coalition members?" The room went quiet. Morrison's expression did not change, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. "Admiral, are you asking if we plan to attack our allies?" "I'm asking how we can trust a species that wages total war as a matter of doctrine," Zektar replied. "You destroyed entire ecosystems, used biological weapons, and committed acts that would be considered war crimes by any civilized standard." General Parker stood up slowly. "Admiral, let me ask you something. Before we arrived, how many Coalition worlds were under Devourer control?" 17 star systems, Zektar answered reluctantly. "And how many Coalition citizens had been killed or converted?" "Approximately 40 billion, the alien admitted. "And after 3 months of human involvement in this war, how many Devourers are left alive?" Zektar was quiet for a long moment. "None." "Exactly," Parker said. "We didn't come here to make friends with the Devourers. We came here to eliminate a threat to our new allies. Mission accomplished." Morrison spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Admiral, you seem to be confusing capability with intent. Yes, we're capable of terrible things, but we choose when and how to use those capabilities. The Devourers were an existential threat that had to be completely eliminated. You are potential partners and trading allies. Do you see the difference?" "But how do we know you won't change your minds?" another Coalition representative asked. This was Commander Veltar, the purple-skinned ground forces leader who had witnessed human tactics firsthand. Dr. Rodriguez answered this time. "Commander, humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet, but we haven't used them because we understand the difference between enemies and rivals. You're not our enemies." "What are we then?" Zektar asked. Admiral Morrison smiled, but it was not a warm smile. "You're our clients." The word hung in the air like a threat. The Coalition representatives looked at each other nervously. Morrison continued. "You called for backup against monsters and we answered. Now the galaxy knows that when diplomatic solutions fail and extinction-level threats appear, there's one species that can handle the problem. That makes us valuable." Over the following weeks, the truth of Morrison's words became clear. The Coalition formally welcomed humanity, but the relationship was not what anyone had expected. Earth did not become just another member world. It became the Coalition's enforcer. Captain Steve Walsh, now Admiral Walsh commanding Earth's first permanent galactic fleet, received regular requests for consultation on military matters. When aggressive species threatened coalition trade routes, they called the humans. When pirates attacked civilian ships, they called the humans. When diplomacy failed and force was needed, they called the humans. The galaxy had learned that sometimes, to defeat monsters, you needed bigger monsters. Dr. Rodriguez, now Earth's chief diplomatic representative to the coalition, noticed how other species interacted with humans. They were polite, respectful, and helpful. They were also terrified. "They treat us like a weapon," she told General Parker during one of their regular meetings. "A tool they keep locked away until they need something killed." Parker was reviewing reports from his new command, the 1st Integrated Human-Alien Special Forces Unit. "Maybe that's what we are, Amy. Maybe that's what we've always been." The training facility for the new unit was located on a neutral world near Coalition headquarters. Parker walked through the barracks, watching human soldiers teach alien recruits techniques that would have been banned by every galactic warfare convention. His lesson to the diverse group of species was simple and direct. There's no such thing as a fair fight when survival is at stake. There's only winning and extinction. Everything else is luxury that you can't afford when someone is trying to kill you. A young alien with tentacles instead of arms raised one of his appendages. "General, what if our enemies surrender? Do we still have to kill them?" Parker considered the question seriously. "That depends. Are they surrendering because they've learned not to threaten you again, or because they're buying time to attack you later? The answer to that question determines whether they live or die." Back on Earth, President Lisa Martinez read reports about humanity's new role in the galaxy. They were respected, feared, and needed. They had access to technology that would advance human civilization by centuries. They had trading rights that would make Earth wealthy beyond imagination. But they had also revealed something about human nature that could never be hidden again. The galaxy now knew that humans were not just another intelligent species hoping to join galactic society. They were something unique and dangerous. A species that had spent millions of years learning how to survive on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them. The final scene of humanity's introduction to galactic society took place in General Parker's office. He was meeting with Admiral Zektar to discuss a new problem, an aggressive species called the hegemony that was threatening coalition territory. "They have demanded that we surrender 3 star systems or face total war," Zektar explained. "Our analysts believe they have the military strength to carry out their threat." Parker looked at the tactical reports without emotion. "Admiral, do you want us to negotiate with them or eliminate them?" "What's the difference?" Zektar asked. "Negotiation means they might threaten you again someday. Elimination means they won't." Zektar stared at the human general for a long moment. 3 months ago, he had been desperate enough to call for help from unknown species. Now he was sitting across from someone who casually discussed the extinction of entire civilizations. "General," he said quietly, "sometimes I wonder if we traded one set of monsters for another." Parker's response was calm and matter-of-fact. "Admiral, the difference between us and the Devourers is simple. The Devourers wanted to eat you. We want to protect you. As long as you remember that difference, we'll get along just fine." The galaxy had called for backup against the monsters. What they got instead was an alliance with the apex predators of the universe, a species that had turned warfare into an art form and survival into a religion. And in the dark corners of space, other threats that had been planning to attack the coalition quietly changed their minds. Word had spread about the humans and what they were capable of doing to their enemies. The galaxy was a safer place now, but it was also a more frightening one, because everyone knew that somewhere out there, waiting in the black between stars, were the real beasts, and they were on your side, as long as you never gave them a reason not to be.